Hello and welcome. I'm Matthew, and I'm delighted you found me. In fact, it is fall, well into the fall. As we're recording, I'm looking past the camera out the window, and leaves are falling. Before we dive into our subject today, which is delicious cranberries, I want to say welcome. Welcome, especially if you've just found me. Thank you if you have found me in the last few months since I started the channel and you've stuck around. Whether you are new here or you are returning, as my French friends always say in their restaurant, welcome or welcome back, as your case may be, please do remember, if you like the sort of thing I'm up to, give each film a like. Certainly share it if you have friends or people you know who might enjoy it as well, and subscribe to the channel. I can't tell you enough how helpful that is. But anyway, let's talk about having a party, entertaining, enjoying ourselves. I'm going to show you two things today. I'm going to show you my favorite cranberry sauce. I'll give you all the details on it, and of course the full recipe with all the little notes and such will be on my blog. Just go to my website, mathertonbaber.com. From the menu, select blog, and there it shall be for you. I'm also going to show you, because it's a rather large recipe, what I do with the leftovers. It's easy and it's delicious. I'll give you a little bit of a story of how I developed this recipe. What else will we do? I'll talk to you about how I suggest you serve it, etc. So settle in, enjoy yourself. That's what it's all about. And let's go right in. So, cranberries. I love them. I love them. My late grandmother made cranberry sauce every Thanksgiving. And hers was something like, for every pound or 2 pounds of cranberries, a whole navel orange. And she ground them all together with table sugar and vanilla extract. And boy, with all that orange pith and raw cranberries, it was bitter. But I also loved it. And it got me thinking on cranberries, and as I began cooking professionally, I thought, boy, those cranberries are good, but there has to be a bit more of a nuanced way to enjoy them. And along the years, my parents and I received an invitation to an autumn dinner party, and to tell you the truth, none of us wanted to go. And I don't remember if my mother and my sister were sick at home, or if my father and I simply drew the short straws that night, but he and I went, and my mother and my sister stayed home. And it was not my speed. The party was not my speed generally, but around the table, for a huge number of guests, this tiny little compote, little footed compote was passed, and it was a cranberry relish, so to speak, that had been cooked and candied and glacéed, and it was rich with dried fruit, but it was so sweet your teeth hurt. And of course there was so little of it served, thank goodness, because it had to serve a huge number of people around the table. But between my early cranberry memories and that, I started to think about developing this recipe. And my mind immediately went to the church hall dinners of my childhood. I grew up in the kind of church that every Wednesday night through, let's say, the school attending months, to help busy families and such, the church provided a meal on Wednesday evenings, and there was a wonderful cook called Barbara Reynolds, who is still around. And Barbara, if you were to happen to see this, I owe you a visit, so take off your apron and we will have a chat together sometime soon, I hope. But Barbara always made this wonderful salad that was very much of the South in the mid-20th century. It was cranberries, and they were set in cherry jello, and it had the addition of pecans and celery. So I thought, you know, that is a taste profile that a lot of people in the South will recognize. So let me start there, but I don't want to use any commercial products. I want something that can be made all of whole natural ingredients. I say whole and natural. Some of them, they've been a bit processed, but you see what I mean. Whole, real food. And I want something that is both strongly cranberry, but interesting, and a diverse accompaniment for as many kinds of meals as we can. Because if you ask me, cranberries are not just for Thanksgiving. I absolutely love them. They're one of the jewels of American produce. I'm greatly encouraged to see that they are becoming more popular around the world. And let me just show you here. You buy them in these little bags. I'm sorry for the disposable plastic, but that's simply how they are distributed for sale. And you buy them either fresh through a very short season, just a couple of weeks in November, December, or more often through the rest of the year you get them frozen. Now, certainly I suggest eating them in season, but once they go on sale, the stores inevitably have more than they sell. So buy them and freeze them right in the bag. They freeze beautifully, and you just take them out and use them when you need them. So let me tell you what I do for this recipe, because that's how I start. And I'm first going to run down all the list of ingredients because it has a few. And this is admittedly a bit extravagant. So my first suggestion is, if you know you want to make this sort of sauce, watch through the summer and end of summer, early fall, when your markets, your specialty vendors start offering their dried fruits on sale. It uses a lot of them, and if you go out and buy them all at once, you might shed a tear for your pocketbook. But if you watch and you pick them up when they're still very good quality, but nearing the end of what the store wants to offer on the shelf, you can save a lot of money, and the quality does not suffer at all. Conversely, if you go out right now and buy all these ingredients, you probably won't use the full package of any of them, so store them on your shelf, dry and a bit of a darker place, and you have them to use in the future. So, again, specific amounts on my blog, but here's the gist of it. Fresh cranberries, lemon, fresh lemon, juice and zest, fresh orange, juice and zest, Granny Smith apple or other rather tart cooking apple that will hold its shape pretty well under heat, pears, large pears, the same thing, I wouldn't use them too ripe. Golden raisins, dried cranberries, dried cherries, orange peel or orange segments, I'll give you details on that in a moment, dried apricots, sweet orange marmalade, ginger beer that's non-alcoholic, it is a soft drink, more on that to come, fresh ginger root, pecans, celery, fresh. What does my note there mean? Crystallized ginger, I abbreviated. Salt and vanilla extract. So I've got most of it here, and I have some already prepared to show you how I serve it. But I want to talk you through each ingredient because there are a lot of little nuances that make all the difference in the outcome of your cranberry sauce. And I call it a sauce because that's what we Americans say we eat. It's Thanksgiving, we're having cranberry sauce. But it could be called cranberry confiture, it could be called conserve, compote, you call it what you like, it is delicious. So for the cranberries, this is exactly what I use, and this recipe I've scaled to begin with 2 pounds, this is 1 pound. If you've bought them fresh and you bring them home to use, that's perfectly fine. If you have them frozen, take them out of the freezer, and I always put a big colander in the sink, put them in, fresh or frozen, run cool water over them, and I agitate them gently to wash off any little bits of sticks, dirt, small pebbles. They are grown and harvested by flooding the bogs and then scooped off the top by machine. So sometimes other bits of things are in with them, and we don't want that in our preparation. Of course, throw out the stones and the debris, and any cranberry that is white, which means it has not ripened, I throw that out. And any that are overripe or got a bit crushed in handling, I throw that out as well. If you squeeze them and they are not plump, or you can tell they're very dark and mushy, I discard those before I proceed. So, cranberries are the base, and I put them in a heavy bottom, non-reactive pot. Heavy bottom, this recipe has a good amount of ambient sugar in it, and you don't want them to scorch on the stovetop. Non-reactive, what does that mean? It basically means not aluminum. You can use stainless steel, you can certainly use enameled cast iron. Some people might even use the kind of tempered glass you can put on a stovetop. But I just have these all-clad, heavy stainless pans, and they're great, professional quality. Invest in good equipment, take care of it, and it will serve you longer than you need it. So in goes cranberries. Then, lemon. I use one of these rasp-style planes, And I first zest it right into the pot and then juice it. The same for the orange. Then I add the apples and the pears. I leave the skins on because this is thickened largely with their pectin. So we want the skins. I do remove the core and I chop them in pieces. In fact, that goes for about everything here. I chop them in pieces about the size of a cranberry. You get the idea. We are making something that is homogeneous yet full of variety. Very interesting to eat. To it, this is completely off the heat. We are just putting everything in. This is a mix and cook preparation. Once the apples and pears are in, stir them, and the citrus juice will prevent the apples and pears, which are cut, from browning. That's very important. Stir them. Once they have been sort of lightly bathed in the acid of the fruit juice, then you can add golden raisins, dried cranberries, like I have here. These have sugar added. So we are not going to pour any sugar into this pot, but the ingredients are plenty sweet, as you'll see. Dried cranberries, of course, the golden raisins I just mentioned. Could you use regular black raisins? You could, but these are awfully lovely. The color contrast in the final preparation is very, very nice. Let's see, dried cranberries, dried cherries. I use these fabulous Montmorency cherries, and when they are dried, they are sweetened as well. So you see, there are sweet ingredients. We don't need to add sugar per se. Then I add this beautifully glacéd orange. There are companies doing them in California. There are certainly companies, we almost always order them from Europe. But what it is not the kind of little bottle of orange peel that I see a lot of people putting into beef bourguignon or maybe drop into bouillabaisse. The only thing that will do in here, and honestly the only thing that little dried shred does for those other dishes, is make them taste a bit dusty, so please don't use that. But the orange with the cranberry is not only classic, it is truly delicious, and it perks it up. It gives the bitter acidity of the cranberry a nice foil. And we're developing a little bit of an orange theme here, as you'll see. So, in addition to that, I put in dried apricots. And I do use the ones that are treated with sulfites to preserve their orange color. It's very, very nice in the dish. Again, cut them to about the size of a cranberry. Then, we need a little bit of liquid to get all of this going together. So I use jarred, the best quality you can buy, of course, sweet orange marmalade. And I will tell you, it is very difficult for me with my local shops to find one made without high fructose corn syrup, but it's what I prefer. So when I'm out and about and traveling and I might go to an orchard or some place that sells this sort of thing, I'm always looking for a good, thick, sweet orange marmalade made without high fructose corn syrup. If you can find it more easily than me, certainly use it. If not, this kind of more commercially made one is just fine. Also, ginger beer. I heard this brand was especially hot with ginger spice, so I gave it a try, and I even chose this variety that says extra, and it was still a little mild for my taste. So experiment with ones you like. I'm slightly ashamed to say the Kentucky ginger ale, which probably is too weak. The local product is called Ale 8, and despite the name, it is not alcoholic. It is a kind of a slightly enhanced ginger ale. You could use ginger ale as a substitute if you can't find ginger beer. But what I'm going to do the next time I make this is go to the Afro-Caribbean kind of grocery store and see if I can find a ginger beer that is really hot and spicy. That's the thing. Also, you want some fresh ginger. And in case you don't know, you have to remove this sort of brown papery skin, and you use the round end of a spoon to just scrape it off consistently all over, including the nubs. And then you just go with your microplane rasp and grate it right in. Just beware that you don't get fingers or fingernails in, because it is easy to do. And let's see, what else? Yes, as I told you, a little extravagant. There are several ingredients, but my word, it's worth it in the end. Pecans. Now, in the South, this is like gold. I have an uncle with a tree, though he's not up and about enough to send them from his own collection very often anymore. You can certainly buy them at the grocery store. There are wonderful orchards down in, let's call it, Georgia and surrounding region that grow fabulous pecans. And if you want to order them and shell them yourself, you might look for what is called a paper shell variety. That means you can basically peel them in your hand and remove these beautiful large pieces of the nut meat without needing a hammer or a vice grip or any kind of aggressive means. Otherwise, the shell is very, very tough. When I was a child, people would sit around with two pecans and crush them against each other in their hands, and it mostly smashed the nuts into a greasy mess as well, and they thought it was wonderful, and I thought it was a darn mess. So, pecans, however you like to get your hands on them, but good and fresh, and toast them first. I put them on a plate in the microwave for 1 or 1.5, depending on the amount of pecans, maybe 2 minutes. When they are fragrant and the flavor is heightened, they're done. Also, I start with halves because they tend to be the best quality. You can certainly chop them a bit smaller, but don't mince them up. You want to know they're in there. You want a bit of aggregate is the textural idea of this dish. Celery. I do not put the celery or the crystallized ginger. I will show you here. This is about how I chop the celery. I hope you can see that on camera. It's a bit thin but long. Again, a nice textural contrast. And crystallized ginger, which I chop as well. I don't put the celery or the crystallized ginger in yet. What I do, everything up until that point, I mix well, I put it on the stovetop, I cover it, over medium-high heat, I bring it up to a boil, stirring occasionally, and use a good stout, like wooden spoon, maybe with a bit of a flat edge to the spoon, or a stainless steel spoon, something where you can really get to the bottom and turn it so you don't scorch. You don't want the sugar in this mixture to scorch. Then I turn it down to more of a kind of a heavy simmer. A simmer, not a boil, but a heavy simmer. And I leave it uncovered, stirring occasionally for about 40 minutes. In that time, the pectin develops and it thickens. And you know it's done because it will thicken to the point where you think, oh, this is rather thick and set. And then over just a few minutes, it coheses even further. It doesn't seize per se, but you'll be able to tell that, okay, as soon as that's happened, it's ready. So I take it off the heat, and that's when I add the celery, the crystallized ginger, pinch of salt, and just a little bit of good vanilla extract. I don't want those ingredients cooked beyond what the ambient heat of that admittedly hot mixture will give me. And then I just set it aside and let it cool, and I refrigerate it covered until it's needed. How long ahead can you do it? If I'm making a big Thanksgiving meal for a crowd, and let's say I'm going to cook for 3 or 4 days, I might make this first, and it can easily hang out in the refrigerator without suffering at all for that length of time. And frankly, even longer. So what I want to do is take a little break, clear this away. I'll come right back and I'll show you how I serve it. And after we talk about that, I'm going to show you one of my favorite things in the whole world, which is what I do with the leftovers. I'll be right back. Welcome back, and thanks for sticking around for this extremely delicious continuation with our discussion of cranberries. Before I move on entirely from the recipe, I want to give you a little warning, and it is particularly for people who are new to cooking fresh cranberries. When you cook them, the heat makes them explode, and explode probably sounds a bit more dramatic than it is. So let's say they pop. And when they pop, they can make a mess and stain, particularly fabrics, and if you had a very porous countertop surface like marble, for example, if that cranberry pops on there, you're going to have a devil of a time ever removing the mark fully. So, the way I combat that is I just always cook this in a higher sided pan than is needed. If my ingredients take, call it 6 inches, maybe I use a 12-inch high pot, and that almost eliminates the problem of any kind of popping beyond the edge. If you don't have the luxury of that size of pan, what you might do is cook them covered or semi-covered with the lid ajar until you hear them. You will hear them pop, pop, pop. And when you hear them pop no more, you know you can remove the lid. Though do remember, once it comes to the boil, reduce the heat. You don't want to keep the heat blazing, or you'll have a different outcome than intended. All that said, do not serve it warm. Serve it chilled and brought to a cool room temperature. Now, I have put it here in a bowl, and this is about half the quantity that this recipe makes. It makes a lot. And I have scaled it that way for my own use because I love it. Oh, I love it. In fact, back to the story about my grandmother. When I was growing up, let's say I was about high school age, she knew that I loved that cranberry preparation she made. Again, it was not this. But I think by the time I was in late high school, she was making about 10 gallons for Thanksgiving. Simply knowing every day from school, I would be at her house eating about 3 or 4 bowls of it, which was not great for my sugar intake, I'm sure, but I had plenty of vitamin C. So, on the subject of my grandmother, I have put it in this beautiful Waterford crystal bowl because she had a firm idea. And before we put the camera on, I was telling my husband this story, and he slightly looked down his nose and said, "Well, I'm not surprised because your family has strong ideas on lots of things," which might be true, but she always felt that you could not serve a salad of any type, be it fresh vegetable like leaf lettuce, tossed salad, or a Jello salad, which was very popular in her era, or this kind of a compote, saucy kind of salad. She never thought you could serve it without a crystal bowl. And if you didn't have a crystal bowl, you better go haunt the charity shops to find one, or you could not serve the salad to your guests. She indeed held firm to that. So in her memory, because she was an awfully hospitable hostess, I have put it in a crystal bowl, which she might well have done. And I'll try to tilt it to the camera to show you. I don't want it to pour out, but you can also see that it is thick enough to not just run from the bowl, and that's what you want. So I will give you a couple of warnings, assuming you're going to put this down on your dining table, even if you are serving buffet style, which for a big holiday or other kind of party gathering you might want to do. I would still put this cranberry sauce on the table, and I would serve it with a plate and a serving spoon, and we'll talk about serving spoons in a moment. But first, I want to say to you, why do you put it directly on the table? Anytime you have something that can stain, and as we mentioned, cranberries can certainly stain, you want to minimize the places where your guests can drop it and ruin something that you've probably worked very hard to purchase and maintain. So, if you serve it on the buffet, your guest is going to serve themselves and could possibly drop it on your buffet linen, on your carpet. They could drop it anywhere from the buffet to the dining table. Sitting down, they could spill it onto the table or the chair upholstery. You get the idea. When you serve this right at the table, yes, there is some risk. They've got to go from the bowl to their plate, but that eliminates an awful lot of hazard. If you want to be absolutely certain that you've minimized the risk of damage, the rule that I learned working in what we might call great venues, Smithsonian museums, and places with a lot of art and objects to protect, the rule was almost always no red foods or drinks. Ever. That meant no red wine, no Campari, certainly no cranberries. But cranberries are delicious, so I say let's have a middle ground. Just put it right on the table and minimize your risk, and do not use it with your most precious linen that you would be heartbroken if some cranberry sauce fell onto it and you couldn't remove the stain. Just save that linen for a different party. So let's talk about spoons. I pulled a few out here to show you some options. Look at this beauty. This is Edwardian. Has a beautiful laurel wreath on the handle. It would be very easy to say, "Isn't this a lovely thing? My guest would think this was pretty for the table." But think about this. If they are scooping this amount, not only is that an awfully large portion, but your amount of cranberry sauce is not going to go nearly as far. in terms of servings, number of scoops per bowl, as if you use a smaller spoon. So I hate to say something such a beautiful object as this is a shovel, but in this case this is a bit of a shovel, so I would say not this. By the way, these rules for serving and little helpful hints go for anything you might be serving. Now, this is a pretty spoon. Look at this. This is classic. This is an old piece from my family. It even is beautifully engraved with Lizzie, who, boy, I've heard about Lizzie my whole life, and I don't remember if she was my maternal great-grandmother's sister or niece or something like that, but my late grandfather and his mother, my great-grandmother, had a lot of strife, so I've heard many stories about how he absconded from the house out to Lizzie's place in the country, where he stayed for a long time and was very happy. I think pretty much left to his own devices. As pretty as this is, it's still a bit large of a serving. So, look at this beautiful little 19th century sterling silver spoon I pulled from the drawer. Isn't that pretty? And look at that. Very appropriately sized bowl of the spoon, for a scoop of this kind of rich, flavorful condiment or sauce, call it what you want. So, I'm going to use this to eat from to show you, but I would also have a small plate in whatever kind of china you're serving on, next to this bowl, so that your guests can serve themselves. I would not just put a metal spoon here on the edge of a crystal bowl, because I want to protect the crystal bowl, and some ham-handed person might rake the silver across, and that would be regrettable. So, let's go here. I know what it's going to taste like, but you don't, so I'll describe it for you. It's wonderful. The celery makes it fresh, and celery is surprisingly citrusy, lemony. And that really shines in this preparation. It is tart. But when you think of it in the context of the meal, that's a very nice contrast, because very often holiday meals are so rich and so, frankly, fatty that this burst of brightness really picks up all the flavors on the table, and that's the mark of a condiment that's really doing its job. The pecans are crunchy, but don't seem like something fishy in the mustard. You know, they seem appropriate. Some of the ingredients sort of melt together, while others maintain more of their own character, while all becoming harmonious together. It's absolutely delicious. And as you see, the texture is rather stiff. It doesn't, you couldn't stand a spoon in it. That would be too far. But it's pleasant. If you put a scoop on your plate, it doesn't run and mingle with everything else. So, boy, it is awfully good. And it's rich. That means there's only so much of it that you or your guests will eat of it at a party. So what to do with the leftovers? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Stay tuned, because I will clear this away and come back when I will show you what I do. I will tell you a little bit of a story of how I came to do it, and it has become a classic preparation around my family, so much so that this big recipe is basically always devoted partially to just eating for fun, serving at the main holiday, and then making this other preparation. Stick around, I'll see you soon. Before I clear this away, I'm finishing this little portion, and it reminded me, I wanted to tell you, if you've watched my content for any length of time, you know that I love combining ingredients whose flavors amplify each other. It's usually because they share some sort of common flavor compound. And one of the reasons this is so unusually delicious is because apricots amplify the natural flavor of cranberries. Try it for yourself. It's so good. I'm going to finish this. I'll be right back. Welcome back. So the holidays passed. You've enjoyed your cranberries. You have avoided any dreadful spills or stains. but you have some cranberry sauce left. That is not a problem that I have. In fact, I've got to make myself not eat it all, so I have some left to do what I'm about to show you. But this would freeze very, very well. You could put it in a heavy freezer type, zip top kind of bag, squeeze out the air, and probably freeze it for ages without losing much of its vitality at all. Could you can it? Yes, you could, but you would have to investigate the acidity to know whether it could be a water bath canning or a pressure canning. I haven't done it, so I can't advise you. If you figure it out, let me know. I'd like to learn together. Other than that, you can keep this in a tight jar or a sealed container in your refrigerator for a couple of weeks. It's fine. And if you have a small amount and you don't want to bother storing it or reinventing it into this dish I'm going to show you, what you could do is serve it over any kind of game. It would be wonderful with pork, it would be wonderful with venison, maybe a chicken you've roasted with a bit of thyme or rosemary, anything like that. Very, very nice. You could probably toss it with a little bit of romaine lettuce, something crunchy and a bit more celery, and even use it as a salad dressing, maybe just slightly augmented, if you like a fruity kind of thing in the fall. I'm going to show you how I make it into a pie. And it is a pie that has garnered quite a following among people who know me, though some questions have been asked. The first time I told my husband I baked with it, he said, "Oh, that's great. I'm going to use some that we had left over that year, and I'm going to make a cranberry cheesecake and take it to work, to his office." And he did, and people were devouring it, and someone stopped and said, "Does this contain celery?" And he said, "Yes, it does." And they thought, and they decided they liked it enough to have another slice. So I hope that's a worthy endorsement. But here's what I do. Check out separately, right here on YouTube, my film about chess pie. I teach you how to make a pâte brisée, which is to say an all-butter pastry, which is exactly what I have here. And I teach you how to make a chess, C-H-E-S-S, pie filling, very classic in the South. What I like to do is make the leftovers of my cranberry sauce into a cranberry chess pie, and it could not be easier, so I'll show you in just a moment. Let me tell you, I cannot vouch for substituting any other cranberry mixture for what I'm about to do. If you have a cranberry sauce that you make and you like, you'll have to conduct your own experiment, and please do not do that when company's coming. Run the trial when you have the safety and security to fail in the privacy of your own company. Certainly, do not use canned cranberry sauce or cranberry jelly. It will melt, and you will have soup, and you'll have a ruined pie crust, and probably a broken heart. Don't do that. This recipe is specifically for the cranberry sauce I've just shown you and the chess pie filling from my other film. Of course, the pie crust and the chess are on my blog as well, as always. So in the unbaked shell, I take my cranberry sauce, and I'm just going to dollop it in. This is a deep dish pie plate and a deep dish pie crust. If you were to buy a pre-made pastry, be sure you get deep dish. The only thing I'm going to caution you about the dolloping, you need the center of the filling to be the chess mixture to know when the pie is properly set. So don't start by putting a big dollop right in the middle. We are primarily dolloping, see, dollops like that, more or less around the sides to start, and not consistent. You need the filling to meander in all the crevices. We did this last year, about I don't know, probably not even 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. We had a friend who was on a long tour of South and Central America, and she came here to the cottage and stayed with us on her way to Paris. And we made her an absolutely sensational meal and served this as dessert. And she, who has known a whole life of wonderful food, her parents owned a great restaurant, loved it, absolutely loved it. And it was completely cohesive with our menu of basically French and Southern classics. So there you go, another endorsement. So I'm dolloping it in, and instead of covering the entire base of the crust, like building a new apartment building, If you can't go out, you go up. So I'm going to make these little stacks a bit taller to incorporate a bit more of my cranberries. Now, if you make this recipe and you still have some of this cranberry sauce left over, don't despair. Eat it on toast, biscuits, like jam, etc. It's delicious. You will have no regrets, and you'll use it up in a jiffy. All right. I want to be sure I've left enough space for the filling, and if I want to dollop in a little more, I can. But now I take the prepared filling and just pour it over. I'll tell you what I want to do. I want a little more space where this is sort of taken more room than I want. So I just divide it with my spatula. And you see here, thank goodness this is a deep dish pie, because I have reached capacity, as is always the case. I can't lift it up or I'll spill it out, and all will be lost. But I'm going to pop this in the oven. I will be back to show you what it looks like when it's all done. Boy, I hate to overstate it, but it's going to be a great night, because this is one of my favorite things in the whole world, and I'll share it with you. See you then. Well, here it is. This is a marvelous pie. It's just emerged from the oven. It smells absolutely divine. I cannot cut it now. We're losing daylight to film, and it is far too hot to cut. This is a pie that you might serve barely warm of room temperature, but preferably chill it to dead room temperature before you serve it. There is enough butter in it and enough beautiful juices from the cranberry sauce that you need to let it solidify. Do not bake this at 3 or 4 in the afternoon and hope to serve it at dinner an hour or two later. That is too soon. Could you do it late morning for dinner? Great. That's a wonderful idea. Whenever you make pastry, there's almost inevitably some trimmings. And if you've seen my pâte brisée and chess pie film, you've seen what I do with them. But I've just baked them separately. And I put over, see, I didn't even trim them. I just took them as they were off the board and put them here on a tray with some parchment paper, and sprinkled them with a little bit of cinnamon and sugar and a rasping of nutmeg. And listen, isn't that beautifully flaky pastry? I hope you might be able to see the edge. I'll show you this other one in case it might be a better opportunity. Let me take a bite of it for you, because it is crispy and delicious. Pardon my chew. That's the story on cranberries. I hope I've helped you understand a bit about how to buy them, how to keep them to use later, should you need to do that, how to make a wonderful cranberry sauce, and when there are leftovers, how to put them into a pie that reinvents them for yet another delightful holiday pleasure. I expect to see you for 1 or more 2 films before the holidays, but I want you to, please, first of all, practice any new ideas before you have guests and try them for the first time. You do not want to have a failure, and we all have them, but it is much better to have them when guests are far away, not coming in 5 minutes. Also, do what's right for you. If I can say one thing about the holidays, it's that I have not always loved them. And when I learned that it was better to not be bound by expectations and traditions writ large, they became a whole lot better. So my encouragement to you for the holiday season is this. Before we all jump in with both feet, think about what parts of it you love and do more of that. Think about what parts of it you don't love so much and do less of that. And by being really honest with yourself and maybe setting a few boundaries with people in your life, keep it simple. Do the things that are rewarding for you and just let the rest go. And if your holidays are good, I hope that makes them great. And if they're not very good, I hope it makes it a little better. And if this year's a bit better and next year's a bit better, maybe like me, you'll come around to like them one day. Where I am in that journey depends on the year, but we're getting there together, aren't we? You know where to find me. Enjoy, enjoy, enjoy. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.